are 1, 2, 3. We are live. Awesome. So we're kicking off 30 Food Safety with Sharon Beals. Really excited to dive in today, Sharon. Would love to hear. Maybe just kick us off. Introduce yourself. What's been your background in food safety?
Okay. Well, first of all, go Cornell. NCAA hockey tournament starts tonight. All the rest of you have March Madness. I got hockey. I have been in the food safety space. Well, we didn't even have food safety. When I graduated from college in 1980, it wasn't even a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but there weren't courses in it. It's like HACCP was being taught. So I was a QC technician at a meat packing plant in Northwest Indiana, Land of Frost, which is really funny because I just ran into last week my first boss in the industry. And I hadn't literally seen him in years. It was so great to catch up. But started off in a small meatpacking plant in Northwest Indiana. They closed the plant because we had lost the business that we were running in that facility, and they graciously offered to transfer me to Searcy, Arkansas. I grew up 20 miles from New York City, and I was having a hard time adjusting to Chicago. So I went to work for and I was stationed in a beef plant up in Milwaukee for a year and a half, and worked my way up the chain. And when Arby's moved from Atlanta to Miami, not a move we wanted to make. So back to the Chicago area where I worked for Orville Kent, where candidly I learned more about listeria control than in any other meat plant up till that point. Because you think about potatoes, where are they grown? In dirt and soil.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Corrected by an ag student. They're grown in soil. They're full of it. And, with every unwashed load of potatoes, cups of listeria are coming into your plant. How do you keep them at the receiving dock? From there, went back to the meat industry, IBP, which Tyson took possession of, bought. And then Smithfield, Maple Leaf Foods, I joined them after the 2008 recall in early 2010. Came back to the US Foods, CTI Foods, and a year and a bit ago, I have joined the ranks of the Potpourri Poo-Poo Platter portfolio career. So I'm the executive director of the Women's Meat Industry Network, which is a lot of fun to give back to an industry that's been good to me. Incoming president of the American Meat Science Association. I do food safety and regulatory work for Beacon Point Labs. I started an LLC to do a little consulting, and the best job of them all is I have a grandson who turns 6 months of age at the end of this month. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when do you get some time with all that to spend time with the grandkid?
Well, unfortunately, he lives in Thunder Bay, Ontario, but he is the only kid in Thunder Bay, Ontario with Buc-ee's gear because G-Mam has outfitted him.
You're raising him right.
When people want to know where I live, I said I'm one exit south of the Buc-ee's on 35 East in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I know exactly where you live.
Oh man, that's awesome! What a career! And yeah, I love seeing. Like I said, I saw you at Food Safety Consortium. You're certainly giving back to people that an industry you've served. And I guess for you, what made you want to get into QC at the time and food safety in general? I don't think there's a real pipeline of Ivy Leaguers going into food safety and quality.
Well, by default, when I graduated, not a whole lot of jobs to be had in the food space. I had spent a summer at the Wishbone Salad Dressing Lipton complex in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, and I thought R&D, this is fun, this is exciting. And when I got out of school, my OMA had given me a plane ticket as a graduation present. I went down to the IFT meeting in New Orleans, which is where like every other fresh college grad, interviewing with every single company that was there, and I see this sign, Land of Frost, and I thought, for the poor Land O'Lakes people, they screwed the name up or something. And sat down with John Butts, whom everybody knows, father of Seek and Destroy. And Easter, and John says to me in his gravelly voice, asked me if I'd ever been inside a meatpacking plant. And I said, no, but I've seen Rocky twice. Does that count? And he's like, you're honest. You had a sense of humor. We figured we could teach you the rest. So I fell into it, if you will, because my degree is human nutrition and foods. Didn't want to be a dietitian just because that didn't interest me. And going into the research end of things, killing rats also did not interest me. But I feel I got the best of both the nutrition background as well as the food science background with the career path I took. And from land to frost, it just, here I was in the meat business, never expected to be, but here I am.
Yeah. And what kept you in? Like, if it looks like Rocky, it's cold, you're killing animals in there. What keeps you going each day?
Well, what's funny, so land of frost, I mean, all further processed, ready to eat. And then when I went to Arby's, anything that went into an Arby's restaurant, had to have an appreciation for and know how to make, whether it was a chicken fillet, Arby's roast beef, French fries, shakes, all that stuff. So I got exposed to a lot of different types of foods. And the wet salad business, like I said, that's where I learned a lot about listeria control. And candidly, with all due respect to Orville Kent, writing yet another HACCP plan for the 45th variety of potato salad we're getting ready to roll out was a little boring. And when I got a call to come back to the meat industry from IBP, I thought, why not? And so I joined, but I also was still in the further processing world. And after IBP bought Food Brands, I'm like, okay, great. What do I do on Monday? Since you're now taking my 5 processing plants and, hooking them up with the Food Brands facilities. Like, we need a regulatory person for the fresh meats plants. I didn't know anything about slaughter. I mean,
yeah.
So, you dive in, you read the regs, you spend time in the plants, you spend time talking to the folks out on the floor in the plants. And, it's just, it's a great industry. We nourish, it's a great source of nutrients for people, protein. And when I see, animal handling has come a long way, just like the food safety systems have come a long way, but it's always dynamic and it's always, continuous improvement is the word of the day. So I guess that's why I've stayed in it. It's just what I'm comfortable with, what I enjoy. And again, I'm at the point in my career where it's time to give back or continue to give back. To think I've been giving back for a while.
And you said it evolves. Like my grandpa was a butcher in Ireland in early 1900s. Like meat's changed a lot since then, and it's probably going to keep evolving over the next 20-40 years.
We've come a long way since The Jungle, and if anybody's never read it, you should. I mean, the intent was to bring light to the plight of the immigrants, but Teddy Roosevelt was like, was horrified. Oh my God, we got to do something about the safety of the product. So
got a bill passed for it. Absolutely. Well, across your career, what have you said across those different areas? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced on the quality food safety side?
In order for an organization to produce safe product, you got to start with people. So my dear friend Kim Rice, her dad was also in the food business his entire life. And he always said, if you take care of the people, they take care of the product and the profits follow. Engaging the hearts and minds, which sounds a little corny, but Michael McCain would tell you, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So making sure that everybody from the top to the bottom, and you set the tone at the top. There's a lot of food safety culture. To me, you can't have any niche culture without a company culture of do the right thing. Not personal safety, food safety, continuous improvement, any of that. So it starts at the top. You set the tone at the top and make sure that everybody from the person running the organization to the person who's sweeping the floor or hopefully squeegeeing the floor and not using a hose to chase that last little piece of fat with overspray and all that other stuff. But they all understand they're making food that people are consuming.
Yeah. Do you have any specific examples of where you've, gotten the hearts and minds of people? Because I think it's like you said, like it's easy to say and maybe think about, but when someone's chopping meat or doing the same thing each day? How do you go about doing that?
I was so excited. So Jeff Dahlman, who's now at US Foods, was the quality manager up at the Pasco slaughter plant at IVP. And we put in a lot of things, dual knives. You've got a clean hand and a dirty hand. For those who do beef slaughter, you'll know what I'm talking about. That, the hide is filthy. Anything that's touching the hide, you don't want to touch in the carcass. We did an awful lot of training, and Jeff called me up one day. He was all excited. He's like, breakthrough. I said, what's that, Jeff? He says, I was up on the skinning line, and when I asked the guy doing the run over job why what he was doing was important, he said, because I'm making food for somebody's table. When you've got somebody at the front of the slaughter process that connects that carcass with something that's in grandma's pot roast, that's a huge breakthrough. That's just one of those aha moments that you go, yes. And that's won the hearts and the minds.
So you think just keeping it front and center that like, hey, what we're doing is affecting, your family's lives, your life, like everyone eats food and it makes a difference.
That daily huddle that most every plant that I see, and candidly, I was on the road. I've been on the road, seems like all of March. They were doing that at the hotel I was staying in, housekeeping, and all the front desk people. 2 mornings in a row, they have a 5-minute huddle. What's important? What's going on? Doing that at the plant level with just a topic. It's like if you go to a meeting and you're there for 3 days and you just get overrun with all these things. You go to one of these little short 1-day seminars or webinar, go attend a webinar, you come away with 1 or 2 little nuggets. And those are much easier to execute and put in place and make stick. So having those today we're going to focus on hand washing. Today we're going to focus on personal safety. Keeping it front and center, keeping it fresh, and then using examples, real life examples, to underscore why what we're doing is important is really critical and helpful.
Yeah. And just getting like not a big overhaul, but just 1 or 2% better every day makes a huge difference at the end. Like if you wash your hands a little better, if you, use your PPE better each day, improving.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Any big challenges that jump to mind throughout your career?
Yeah. Well, throughout my career.
Big, I guess more big, like any regrets?
Not speaking up sooner. When you first start out, you're always like, okay, I'm the junior person in the room and my ideas don't count. And, what if I say something stupid and I know a lot of people who know me would be surprised to hear that I wasn't always as, as I am today. But speaking up sooner, everybody has a voice, and it's really critical that you share those thoughts. And more important, or not more important, but just as critical, when you're those other people in the room and the junior person is trying to say something, be kind. We all started out at some point once in our lives too. Be kind, let them speak, and don't let other people run over the top of them.
Yeah. So you think like, hey, early in your career, speak up a bit more. What do you think that looks like? Because I think I can picture someone, a supervisor, telling a CEO what's what, and that maybe not going over well.
Well, delivery is, of course, really important. Hey, you really screwed that one up. One of the things that I tell people is practice. I think one of the greatest inventions of the world, aside from windshield wipers with cleaning fluid in them, is the Bluetooth. So I talk to myself, and I talk to myself out loud, which is great when you're commuting in the car, because that's how I prepare to have a difficult, and maybe not even a difficult conversation, but you're going into a big meeting, you want to put your best foot forward. Practice out loud, and then answer yourself with different answers so that you're ready to pivot if the conversation pivots. I tell people
Yeah.
I'm not that glib. I've just practiced a lot.
Yeah.
And it worked really well until I started taking the bus to US Foods instead of my car. That was a little problematic.
Yeah. Talking a little too much on the bus about food safety stuff. And any like, I think that's a great tool is just having the conversation before you get to the meeting, practicing it out, going through conversations. Any example on when you use that yourself and it was a big win or anything like that?
Well, I remember when we, practice does make perfect. And, preparing and being able to speak in simple language. So when the first big romaine recall hit, Kim Rice and I were both at US Foods. And we said, we need to pull back all the romaine. Well, what do you mean? It's just the chopped and bagged stuff. And I'm like, look, in grinding, when you're making ground beef, we're not adding 0157 at the grinder. It comes in with the raw material. So while it's just chopped and bagged, it had to have been at the source with the whole heads. Not a popular decision at the time, but we laid out our thought process so that the CEO and the head of merchandising, they were all like, yep, understand completely. That's what we're going to do. A week later, when several people in the Alaska prison system had the outbreak strain from whole head field harvested lettuce, all of a sudden we were looked at as visionaries. I'm like, no, it's just, it's the only thing that made sense to us. And that brings me to other piece of advice is learn those critical thinking skills. Just because you've always been in, say, a bakery, or you've always been in dairy, you've always been, pick a food segment. It doesn't matter. Sanitation is sanitation. Learn to extrapolate what you've learned from your segments. And sometimes you're going to bring in a goofy idea.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like me going from being a ready-to-eat person to slaughter. They were like, what do you mean we have to wear, hairnets that don't have holes that are this big in them? And it's like, why are you bothering? But different perspectives help generate and help push that continuous improvement thing. But folks need to use those critical thinking skills and connect those dots, and then be able to convey it in a really simple, easy to understand language.
Wow. That's a courageous story you told, but also you're right. Just, thinking about the skills and the practices. Like we had someone, Sharam, on a few weeks ago, and he was coming from the auto industry, and he was like, oh yeah, it's zero defect quality there. Like, what are these principles that we can take and apply across the industry?
Exactly. Equipment doesn't care if you're slicing salami or cilantro. Sanitation is sanitation. And so apply those principles.
Yeah. Do you think, because I know we've messaged about this before, but I guess, do you have any advice on like how food safety can focus more on being like, hey, this is a team effort. It's the whole company, and kind of getting over people maybe thinking, oh, they're just telling me what to do, or, they're just trying to spend more money or slow down production, whatever it is.
Well, the piece of advice for the technical folks listening to this is we're not in this as a charity. So when we're making our pitch for a new limb system, or we need to fix this or do that, we have to be better at speaking in terms of return on investment. Yeah, it may be the regulatory requirement. I get it. But that does not go over so well as, well, this is what it's going to cost, but here's what it's going to save. And our return on investment is going to be under a year, or, building all those things in is really critical. In fact, that's going to be the last session at the Food Safety Summit this May, is how to get to the yes instead of always getting no. just a little plug there for people that haven't made their plans yet, and plan on staying till the end.
Yeah, I'll be there. I won't miss it.
Spoiler
alert. Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, got it. Talking in terms of ROI, breaking down easier. I think that's a great point, because I think there's food safety language and there's business language, and you got to bridge the gap sometimes.
And so when you then get to, you asked how to make sure you get good participation. I used an example from a previous place of employment where a hazard analysis on brand new product line was done by the HACCP coordinator at her cubicle.
Yeah.
And we wound up having a pretty significant quality problem. I won't go into too much detail because I don't think the statute of limitations has run out. But long story short, use that as a teaching opportunity to say, okay, we need maintenance, we need operations, we need the food safety, we need the quality people, we need a couple people from the line. Now let's all walk down there and see how we would have done things differently with all of our different eyes. And once you start doing a couple of those types of things, for material exercises, we once, again, in a company had what we thought was going to be the whole entire day of production. Well, once we got everybody in the conference room and started whiteboarding, what do we know for a fact? What's reasonable to assume? Collectively, the team we were able to get down to a good decision, a comfortable and easily supported decision as to why it was only this much and not, this much.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful, especially when you've got the plant manager in there seeing the dynamics, because I said, you set the tone at the top. So you start having some of those types of successes, and then it becomes a pull. Like, we want to do this. You don't have to push anybody into it.
I love it. Okay, next question. What is your hottest take in food safety right now? Feel free to let it rip. Don't be shy, Sharon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's tone it down, Sharon. And I mean this all sincerity. And, you and I talked before we started this taping about, you got to have a little fun. You got to tell the war stories, because otherwise no one's going to pay attention. My real fear is we've made so much progress. Animal welfare, food safety, in ready to eat, in raw, and oh, by the way, guys who are listening, who are over on the fresh and raw side of things, when you clean to the microbiological level, you increase your shelf life. So that's another way to get to that plant manager. We took one of our poultry plants at Maple Leaf, and we told the plant manager, look, it's going to cost us a little bit to get first and second processing at pre-op, mind you, to a ready-to-eat standard. We got 2 extra days of shelf life in ground chicken. That's huge money. Wow. Huge. More than surpassed the little additional outlay of cost. But when I look back at all the progress we've made, and when last year happened, it's like, what happened? What happened? We yes, we've had recalls. Yes, we've had some illnesses, but nothing on the scale of last year. So my take, if you will, my fear is that because we have a whole generation that hasn't gone through, last summer notwithstanding, a crisis, is we can't forget the lessons of the past. And, it's a whole lot easier when you've actually lived through the lesson to not forget it. I think it's Steve Tiuki who made the comment to me not that long ago. Just because the data says it's right doesn't mean it's not a good, stupid idea. Sometimes you just it's just a bad idea. I don't care today. It's just a bad idea. And so sometimes you got to listen to your gut too. But my biggest fear is that everything that we have learned is going to start to, be forgotten. And that would be a shame, because we should never have to relearn a lesson, a hard-earned lesson, a hard-won lesson, because food safety is not competitive. Yeah, I think it was then the American Meat Institute, because they've had a couple of name changes. Their board of directors 22 years ago declared food safety is not competitive. And I've taken that to heart. Other food spaces have taken that to heart. And we shouldn't have to relearn lessons.
Yeah, and it's like those are hard, like you said, they're hard lessons, but they're hard lessons to repeat too. What, any solutions that jump to mind that you're like, hey, this is the hot take that like we can't regress. We have to keep this stuff top of mind. Is it a food safety history book, or what do you suggest as ways to keep those things top of mind and be part of the solution?
Larry Keener and I talked about that we should, at a food safety summit, do a retrospective of starting with Tylenol, the Tylenol tampering case.
Yeah.
And what are some of those seminal moments in food history that may be forgotten? I forgot about that. It's making sure you take advantage of the training opportunities. You take advantage of those sessions where people share the war stories. I'm not here to plug for the Meat Institute, but the Advanced Listeria Workshop, every time I've sent somebody to that, it's like, oh my God, it's the after hours stories, or it's the stories that get shared during it that really bring stuff home that I can then take back to my organization and plug in. Unfortunately, it's only given twice a year, and 60, 80 people is all they can accommodate, which is why we've got a group working on how can we make an intro course and can we make it available online. But that's just listeria. Think about slaughter, think about animal welfare. There are a lot of different organizations that put on training. And one of the other effective tools, Bill Marler just had a post a couple, 3 weeks ago about a physician, I believe it was in Denver, who contracted listeriosis. And it was heartbreaking to watch. And sometimes it just takes something like that to sit down with your leadership team and say, this is why this is important, or with your with the hourly workforce, with everybody within your organization. This is a real person who lost his life. And when we don't do our job, when we all collectively don't do our job, it can have horrible ramifications. Nobody wants to think about it. It's like the raw milk people. Like, I've drank it my whole life. Well, good for you. But why are you advising a woman who asked for help on a Facebook page because she has an immunocompromised child, if that was a good idea? It's like, go with the numbers. And a colleague of mine on this same thread had probably the best argument. She's like, would you not buckle up your child in the car just because you've never been in a car wreck? Would you not put a helmet on your child when they go skateboarding? Tony Hawk wears a helmet, for God's sakes. Why would you not take one of these precautions with your most precious child or grandchild or whomever? So
and you're saying like food safety, quality, like, hey, we should be taking those and reporting back to the team of like, hey, this is what happens when we don't do XYZ.
It can be very powerful. It can be very depressing, but it can be extremely effective.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not science. You got to get to the heart. You got to get back to that hearts and minds. You can do all the data and science you want, but you got to get people to feel it here.
Yeah. I have a severe food allergy, and every now and then people will send me links from like a mislabeling, and a girl last year in New York died. She was like 19, and you're right, like that. And sometimes I'll tell people that, just quality managers, and it'll be like, oh, my son has a food allergy, or my cousin has a food allergy. And the more we just connect and that the work we're doing, I think it makes a big difference.
I feel, food allergies are so tough. I've been blessed that my family, that's not something that we've had to worry about. But for those with kids, and talk to parents who my child's getting ready to go off to college, and I'm scared out of my wits that they're going to eat something that hasn't been vetted. That's
Yeah,
when you're an adult, you can advocate for yourself, but you think about you're 18, you're going off to college for the first time, and
yeah, it's
free of mom and
scary.
dad. Well,
Yeah,
just
I always say
one.
that it's like, yeah, I always say it's like being Superman, being scared of kryptonite, where you just never know like what could be in your food, and you're putting a lot of trust in the food system and in food safety and quality teams to label things well.
Mm-hmm. And
So
accidents,
I love
I
it.
get.
Yeah,
People. I really don't think anybody shows up to work purposefully to do a bad job.
yeah,
But so that's why we always have to all be on our guard every day,
yeah,
all of us.
yep, absolutely. Okay, great. If you could give one piece of advice to the next generation of food safety leaders, what would it be?
Just because, well, I think my best piece of advice would be to suck out all the institutional knowledge from those around you that you can. Reach out. I mean, even if you don't know the person directly, like call up John Butts and say, John, can we talk about seek and destroy?
Yeah,
Because, eventually we're all gonna retire or, move away, but there's so much history and so much great institutional knowledge. And yeah, things are going to change. We get new techniques all the time. We're able to do things differently and in a safer fashion. There's new interventions, but it's really good to some of the basics. They just, again, sanitation is sanitation. Yeah, we've got some really innovative, acid stacking techniques and things like that. But reach out to those that have been before you and pick their brains.
yep,
We're happy to share. We are, because we don't
yeah,
want to see history repeat itself from that regard.
yeah. And you just have to ask. So you're saying go reach out to the best, find the mentors, ask the questions.
Yeah, always happy to help. I can't think of a single person, a single friend or colleague who's not in this space that wouldn't say, yeah, let's take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, pick my brain, ask me anything.
Yeah, that's great advice. Any resources jump to mind that you would recommend?
Oh gosh. Well, there's certainly between the American Meat Science Association and the Institute of Food Technologists, IAFP, there are so many good, solid, science-based organizations. It's not always easy to attend the meetings because, again, there's a cost associated with it. And it's really frustrating to go to attend a meeting. You come back with all these great ideas and you don't get to implement any of them because you haven't talked about ROI. But I would start with your trade organizations. I would start with those other professional organizations that are out there. Get engaged. I see that with the Women's Meat Industry Network. We only have a couple, 3, 4 committees, and getting that member engagement and the folks that join those things opens up a whole new world. So, if you belong to one of those organizations, get involved, get engaged. It just widens your circle. And, I don't know everything about everything, but man, within like 1 degree of separation, I probably have a good 98% of it covered, and and if I don't know, somebody calls and asks me, and if I don't know, I send them to the person that can help them. That's called network. And that's, it's not a dirty word.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Great. Those are great resources to check out. And then the last question. So you said golden nuggets. I think there's like 10 or 20 golden nuggets in this conversation we've had. If you could see anyone else get interviewed on 30 food safety, who would you like to see and why?
Oh, goodness. I think I've got so many. Jeez. Only one? Damn it.
Only one.
Oh. So Jennifer Williams, I worked with at Tyson, and Jennifer has been branching out into a lot of different. She came from Hormel, so she came from Ready to Eat World, but she's been branching out into a lot of different things. She is, when it comes to data, she's got some really digitization. I can't even say it. Digitization of data. She's got some really unique perspectives, and I got to throw in Steve Tiuki from Maple Leaf, just because he's in, when it comes to sanitation and data, he's another one that just I think you could get the both of them on the same show, and it would be 60. It would be take 60. I don't know.
Yeah, it would need an hour to dive in.
Yeah, there's just so many people and that just have wonderful backgrounds and different perspectives, and that's what makes us stronger, those different perspectives.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. We appreciate it, and we'll see you at the Food Safety Summit.
You betcha. Thank you.
Awesome.